Hi everyone, it's Dawn Fisher of Morning Glory Needleworks. Welcome to my 7th FlossTube video. And again, I want to thank everybody who has subscribed, commented, liked my videos. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the input. And as always, I want to tell you that all links, anything I talk about, information about me, Morning Glory Needleworks, my Etsy shop, all that, I have links posted. There's what's called a description below the video on YouTube. It's a section. And if you scroll down through that, all the links are at the bottom of everything I mention. Also, what I do is I put chapters in. Some of the videos get kind of long and you may not have time or want to watch the whole video, or you may want to watch parts of it over and over again, of course. So what you'll find is what's called chapters. It lists each section of the video, and there's a timestamp next to it, such as 3 minutes and 24 seconds. So if you click on that number, it will take you right to the section you want to see. If you only want to see the stitch of the month, or if you only want to hear about the antique item I'm talking about this time, you can just click on that. So again, thank you. And it's April 1st. 2022, and let's go. So a life update. I want to tell everybody we are doing great. We're still working out. We're going to the Y. We actually started going more often. I love our Y. It's wonderful. And if you're old, if you're of a certain age, you can join Silver Sneakers for free. And our local Y has that, and it's a wonderful facility. We've been taking some classes for balance, strength, core, that type of thing. We also took our first yoga class, like a chair type yoga class, and it was wonderful. And so we're hoping to go more often. We're planning, we're not even hoping, we're planning to go more often. So we're hoping to be able to go like 5 days a week. It's like 45 minutes for the class, but we're having a great time. And another thing I want to mention was in the news recently, they've been talking about Bruce Willis having aphasia. And I want to let everybody know, a lot of you already know, but Jeffrey has aphasia. He had a stroke last year. It was a mild stroke. We were very lucky. He was very lucky that it didn't affect either side of his body. It just affected his speech and his reading and writing is what aphasia affects. And now that Bruce Willis and his family have announced this, it's really brought it to the world's attention. And I'm glad of that, because a lot of people, when they talk to somebody with aphasia, they think they're mentally deficient or have something wrong, and everything's still there. You just have problems getting the words out, or the correct words out, especially there's different, everybody's learning a lot more about it now, but there's several different ways you can get aphasia. Some people may have a tumor. Jeffrey had a stroke, and it just happened to hit that spot where everything comes together. But he's done much better. We've gotten some help from a group called Voices of Hope for Aphasia. They're a local group, but they're also nationwide, or they can be, because they have a website. And we actually met them over Zoom a few times. We did meet them in person also, and they've really been a great help to us. They helped me understand how it feels to have aphasia. They actually did a few little examples with the people without aphasia to try and mimic what someone with aphasia goes through, trying to get the words out, and how frustrating it can be. And they've helped thousands of people in the area. We met some people that, one man had a very, very bad stroke, and when he came to, not only was he had problems with sides, he could only say one word, and not one word at a time. He could only say the word cat. That was it. No other words. Everything was cat. He can now talk fully. Not everybody recovers. I don't know. They have not said what happened with Bruce Willis, if it was a stroke or something else that happened to him. But there is help, and it will never go away. This is not something that's curable. He will have this the rest of his life, but learning to live with it and just making people understand what aphasia is important. And it meant a lot to us when he and his family announced this. I'm sad for him. He's one of my favorite actors. But I did provide a link below to Voices of Hope for Aphasia. So you can go to their website and learn more about it. I believe they have links to other websites and where you can learn more about it. But Jeffrey did when he was in rehab, and even when he came home, he had a speech therapist that worked with him and helped him learn to talk better and read. I didn't realize how much it affected his reading till he tried to read, and he doesn't write real well yet. But I know I do sometimes. I'm trying to come up with a word and I know what it is, but it won't come out. But it's even worse for him. And it's very frustrating, but everybody's been very patient. All of our friends are very patient with him and they understand. So when you see somebody who's having a hard time talking, don't think that they're necessarily not all there. It could be they just have aphasia and can't get the words out. But I just want to make that known to everybody. And again, thank the family of Bruce Willis for coming out with that. So now moving on, I want to talk about some antiques in my collection. What I want to talk about, this is one of my favorite books. These are, I have a lot of books, but these are some of my favorite antique needlework books. This one is called School Needlework, and it's by Olive C. Hapgood, teacher of sewing in Boston Public Schools. Now, this is my second copy of the book, and I'll talk about the other copy here in a minute. You can find copies of this on eBay. They also have digital downloads of this now. If you search on Google, what I did is I put in School Needlework by Olive C. Hapgood, Hapgood, and olive is like green olive. Just search for that, School Needlework by Olive C. Hapgood, and a bunch of stuff came up. ABE Books has it, and Google actually has a scan of the entire book that you can download for free. And then there was other ones you could purchase that were reproductions of the book, more recent reproductions. One said it was a facsimile, and actually it was from 2021, but there is a softcover copy that you can purchase from 2006, has a different cover on it. But so it's still available. This is the a first edition from 1893. And this copy here, this book here, is the Pupils edition. So you can see here, it says Pupils edition. And on the next page, it is copyright, it's hard to see, 1893 by Olive C. Hapgood. And both of my copies are first editions. So in this book, it's wonderful. This was a school book, actually from a school, which is exciting. And this was property of Lancaster College, which is in Pennsylvania, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It says property of Lancaster College for our daughters. And the book is number 656. And then it had a place for the girl to write her name. And it said, please insert name by pencil only, to be returned when student has finished the course. Now, this book here says it was owned by Louisa Copeland. So she signed her name, and I don't know if she was a schoolgirl or somebody that had purchased it later, because of course I bought it used. I believe I got this copy on eBay. I'm not sure. So what it says in the front, this is the title page. It says School Needlework, a course of study in sewing designed for use in schools. Now, again, this is by Olive C. Hapgood, and she was teacher of sewing in Boston Public Schools, it says here. So this is the pupils edition. And I like this quote in the front of the book. It's by John Ruskin. I'm not sure who that is. I'll have to look him up. It says, learn the sound qualities of all useful stuffs and make everything of the best you can get, whatever its price. And then every day, make some little piece of useful clothing sewn with your own fingers as strongly as it can be stitched, and embroider it or otherwise beautify it moderately with fine needlework, such as a girl may be proud of having done. That's something we can all live by. So the next section, there's the table of contents. Oh, I dropped a card. Table of contents, and it has general directions, plain sewing, ornamental stitches, drafting, cutting, and making garments, and description of articles used in sewing. So this is the general directions, and I like this. At the beginning, it says, "Dear girls," because no boys would ever take a sewing class. You have now become old enough to prepare for women's duties, and one of these is the art of sewing, which we will take up as simply as possible. By following the given directions carefully, you will become able to dress your dolls, assist in your mother's mending, make garments, fancy articles, etc. A convenient outfit for your school sewing consists of a large bag, large enough to hold certain necessary materials and the garment to be made. The bag should be made of dark or medium colored cloth so that it may not soil easily, and should have a strong gathering tape. And the following articles are needed. And it talks about things you need for your sewing kit. So half a yard of bleached or unbleached cloth, or half bleached cotton cloth, spools of different sizes of thread, a well-fitting silver or celluloid thimble for the second finger of the right hand, an emery bag to brighten the needle, a paper of number 5 to 10 ground down needles. Now, ground down needles, I would assume that means sharp needles and not like a tapestry needle. And a pin ball filled with small pins, a tape measure, a piece of wax, and a pair of scissors for girls in the higher classes. And then it actually talks about directions on how to put away your work, how to fold your sample piece of fabric, and put your thimble in your bag first because you don't want to forget it. And it talks you how to fold up your sewing and put it in the bag. It says directions for sewing. Now we can still follow some of these. Be very careful to have clean hands. Yes. Sit in an erect position, never resting any part of the arm on the desk. Oops. Me and my recliner, stitching away. Do not fasten the work to the desk or knee. Never sew without a thimble. Either the top or the side of it can be used, or either the top or side of it can be used, the thimble. Do not put the work or thread to the mouth as that will soil it. Oops. No licking your thread. And it just talks about, actually, I like this. When scissors are not used, I assume this means the lower grades where they don't let the children have scissors at that point. When scissors are not used, to break the thread, place the left thumbnail firmly over the last stitches, wind the thread around the right forefinger, and break the thread with the right thumbnail. I have never had that described to me before. I just thought that was very interesting. It also talks about do all sewing nicely, making the stitches small, and even having the wrong side look as neat as possible, and sewing the corners with great care. We can still do that. And I like this: when obliged to take out stitches, use the eye of a needle and pick out one stitch at a time. I do that. Pick out the thread on one side and then flip it over and pick out the thread on the other side. This does prevent wear on the thread. If you pull the thread out from the front side, fold it over, or flip your piece over and pull your thread out from the back side. Otherwise, you're not pulling it through two holes at once, and it can prevent wear on your fabric. So as you go on, it talks about needles. It gives all the information about needles, thread. It says a needle is a small piece of steel pointed at one end and having an eye at the other to receive the thread. Needles are of various sizes and shapes according to the uses for which they are intended. It talks about different sizes of needles. It's like I said, this is a fabulous book. Here's some drills. It talks about how to hold your fabric to sew. And this is sewing. This is not necessarily cross stitching and other. This is sewing, although they do talk about other types of embroidery and stitching later. So here's gathering. And as you work through the book, it becomes more advanced. Here's buttonhole stitching. And back then, you did not use a sewing machine to do your buttonhole edging. You did the buttonholing by hand. And here it shows different types of buttonhole stitches. There's sections on darning, how to darn and mend. People did not throw things away like we do today. You would darn, especially socks or clothing. Here, back further in the book, here's some of your fancy stitches. Feather stitch. It talks about blanket stitch, buttonhole or bias piecing. And now this is the section I wanted to talk about. This is more what we do. It's called marking or cross stitch, marking stitch. So on the next few pages, there's some diagrams, some charts. So I'll show you those. But it says the marking stitch consists of a cross stitch taken over 2 threads of canvas. To make the stitch, draw the needle through from underneath at the lower right-hand side, at the lower right-hand corner of the square for the stitch. Insert the needle at the upper left-hand corner, bringing it out at the lower left-hand corner. Now they're using a sewing method. So they're going through the fabric and coming right back up, bringing the needle right back up. They're not using the stab method where you would go straight down, pull your thread all the way out and go back up. They're using the sewing method. I use the stab method usually because I'm usually working on a frame. So anyway, insert the needle at the upper left-hand corner, bringing it out at the lower left-hand corner, and insert the needle at the upper right-hand corner and bringing it out at the lower right-hand corner of the next stitch. So they actually do their stitches, saying to do the stitch the opposite of how I do mine. I usually start in the lower left, go to upper right, go down, go the other way. They said to start in the lower right and go to the upper left. So it doesn't matter as long as you're consistent. It also says, and again, this is true, make no knots, but leave an end of the thread to be worked over with the first stitches, or it can afterward be run in and out under the letter. Fasten the thread in the same manner. The stitches should all be crossed the same way, and the thread should be fastened after finishing a letter, not carried from one to another. Have the back of the work look neat. It says, when marking on canvas is understood, fine material can easily be marked by basting a piece of scrim over the place to be worked, and after taking the stitches, drawing out the threads of the scrim. That would be like a waist canvas, how you attach a piece of waist canvas and you can stitch on any fabric, and then later you pull all the threads of the waist canvas out. Now these are the alphabets provided. So they have those. And actually on this diagram, it does show the stitches going the way I do them. It doesn't matter as long as you're consistent. That's the important part. And here is another section on this. Now these are actually worked over one thread. These are, if you can see, kind of out of focus, but they're worked in a tent stitch. The background is supposed to be the canvas itself. And these are worked in a tent stitch or a half cross stitch. And there's also eyelet stitches shown here. And here's italic numbers. So when the book goes on, as it gets more advanced, drafting, cutting, and making garments, patterns weren't as readily available back then. So you had to make your own pattern. So here's instructions on how to make an apron. Probably one of the first thing you made. Here's instructions for a child's bib. So anyway, this book is fabulous. Here's a child's sack tier. And that's how you would make, draw out the pattern on paper. Size for a child age 2 years. So anyway, it gives all the directions on how to draw out a pattern and make it, how to resize. But again, let me show you the cover of this. There's a beautiful thimble with scissors, a spinning wheel, spool of thread. I love the back. This is cotton. These are cotton balls. This is flax. We have a sheep here for wool and a silkworm for the silk. So again, this is the pupils edition of this book. I also have the teacher's edition. This was the first book I bought. I found this in an antique store and I bought it. And after I got it, I started looking and found the student edition, I think probably on eBay. So again, this one is exactly the same. It's dated 1893. This one has a name in it, Mittie C. Grady, dated 1908. And I assume she was a teacher, that this was her book she used to teach. Everything is the same. The front page is the same. This one does have a preface in it for the teacher to read. It talks about the importance of instruction in sewing in the public school is now generally recognized. And it talks about how to use the book and that type of thing. Again, the rest of the book is exactly the same, but there is a whole section in the back called Teaching the Lessons. Now, this is where just for teachers, and you can see here, this is a stand they recommend to use for teaching. You see this has a very large woven fabric here. It's probably not fabric, it's probably just woven cord on this wonderful stand. But that's actually kind of how I teach, because I use the plastic canvas. I've actually made things like this before, but the plastic canvas and the camera works best. But it talks about how to teach, how to use drills, how to, not drills, but a school drill to teach simultaneous teaching, demonstration lessons. And it talks about all the different ways how to keep pupils busy. It talks about thread and stitches, that type of thing, when to teach what. And so here we have here, it's called the Course of Sewing. And what this is a 6-year plan. They taught sewing in the schools for 6 years. Can you imagine? So in grammar school, they taught it for 6 years. So each year you worked on different things. Now it does say it can be shortened or condensed if you don't have 6 years. So the first year you want to teach the student how to sit, the position of the student while stitching, how to thread a needle, make a knot, how to use a thimble, coarse buttonhole stitch, running, stitching, that type of thing. They have an examination at the end. And then the second year, you move on. It's fine buttonhole stitch, French hem on damask, gathering and placing of gathers. The third year, blanket stitch, buttonhole and cotton cloth, catch stitch, darning a straightaway tear or cut in cotton cloth, French seam, loops, packets. You can see we're moving on. The fourth year, bias piecing, chain stitch, darning on stockinette, double gathering overhanded to a band, facing, gussets, hooks and eyes. And at the end of every year, they have an examination. So the fifth year, they teach mitered corners, bias fell, darning tear and woolen cloth with silk, ravelings, or hair. They used hair to repair. I'd not heard that. I've heard of hair being used for other things. Embroidery knots, eyelet holes, feather stitch, honeycombing, different more advanced type stitching. And then in the sixth year, the only thing they say here is drafting, cutting, and making of garments, and also cutting from patterns. And that is your final year, is just learning to make your own clothes. And this I thought was interesting. This is an actual layout of a sewing sampler. I have a few pieces that are similar to this, and I've seen them. It shows how they put the cuffs on, buttons, buttonholes, gathering here, different types of hems, gathering of the bottom, pockets, different, if you can see it, there's different types of stitches shown here. So this would be like a final exam piece where you would complete all these. And if you've completed all of these, you can move on to the next year. So stitching was a little bit different back then. Here it also shows some fancier stitches that they learn as they get older. These are not in the children's books. Here's some, these remind me of the red work patterns you can buy. I have a quilt made by my grandmother. When she was younger, she bought, I think, what are called penny squares. I think that's what they're called. They're little red work prints. And then you did a red work design on the square, little muslin squares. And it was put together into a quilt. So, and here's some more advanced type embroidery designs. So those are my books on, just going to look in the back here. There was some also, oh, here's a course of sewing for industrial schools. Some women, that was what they went into was industrial sewing. It also has advanced classes for girls to move on to if they were already could do what the other students were doing. They would break the class up and have more advanced students. But again, if you're interested, you can find these books online. It's called School Needlework by Olive C. Hepgood. And although the children's book is prettier, this one's a lot more interesting because it has all the teaching information in it. So that is my antique item for this time. Next time we'll talk about something else. If there's something you would like to learn about, let me know, and I will see if I have any in my vast collection here, and I can do some research and talk about it. So next, on to Stitch of the Month. I just want to thank everybody who's joined. We have over 380 members of the Facebook Stitch of the Month Facebook page. Again, the link is in the description below. So if you want to join, you just have to ask to join, and then you have to answer a couple of questions. They're simple questions. How long have you been stitching? That kind of thing. A few people I have turned away and said, please answer the questions, and they did. I have actually deleted a few people that tried to join. We obviously were not stitchers, especially young men from overseas. I didn't think they were really stitchers. They had no stitching on their Facebook page anyway. So I do kind of keep track of everybody who joins. I just want to make sure that we don't get hit with a bunch of spam or anything like that. And once you join, feel free to post, show things you're working on, show some stitches you're doing, ask questions if there's some stitches you would like to learn, or if you have a question about a stitch. Either I or somebody else in the group. There's a lot of very experienced stitchers joining. You know, someone will help you, and we're all there, you know, because we love needlework. So for April, I have decided by request, a while back, somebody mentioned, I believe it was Nancy Walsh mentioned she wanted to learn satin stitch, or easier way to do satin stitch. So that's what we're going to go over this month, is satin stitch. And that also ties into something I'm going to be talking about in a little while. This file will be available on the group, the Stitch of the Month Facebook group, and it will be available as a download. I'm going to upload it as a PDF, and you can see there's a chart here, and I have it diagrammed in just 2 shades of an antique blue. You can use whatever colors you want. The outside edge is satin stitch, so that's what we're going to go over. Again, I did it in 2 shades of blue. Here's the detail of the outer edge of the piece. And this is fairly small. It's 29 by 29. So depending on the count of linen you use, it could be a small pin cushion or even a scissor fob. So on 28 count over 2, it would be like 2 inch by 2 inch. So fairly small. So in each square on this chart is it's 2 threads of fabric. And just read the little notes about it's not exactly the same all the way around. So you want to just pay attention to that. And now the satin stitches, you can use 2 strands or 3 strands, depending on the coverage you want for your satin stitch. 3 strands can work better on a larger count, like a 28 count linen or 32 count. But if you're working smaller count, I'm actually working on a piece that's 46 count. So I'm using 1 strand of silk, because I tried using 2 and it was very, very heavy. So just try a little sample and see what coverage you like the best. You can try it off to the side, or try it where you're going to stitch, and then just take it out if you don't like it. So what I'm going to do, I have, like I said, this diagram here, and it shows how to do the stitch. Now I did these, it's diagrammed or charted in just using 2 shades of blue. So the satin stitches are done in the darker blue, which I believe is 932. And then all the little decorative stitches around the edge are a lighter blue, which is 3752. That's in the instructions. But you can use whatever colors you want. You can use more colors, and you can use 1 color, whatever you want to do. And these are just straight stitches here. And then these are just a large cross stitch over 4 threads. Now, if you wanted, you could do eyelet stitch there. I think that would be a really interesting place to use the eyelet stitch. We talked about that in an earlier month. So I am going to demonstrate the stitch for you and talk about how to do the satin stitch. First, I want to talk about laying tools. I'm going to show and demonstrate using what is called a laying tool. Now, there's a lot of different laying tools out there. There's one, it's called a trolley needle. I don't know where mine is at. I was using it and it's somewhere. So a trolley needle has a large, see the large needle, and it's actually a metal thing that fits around like a ring that fits around the end of your finger, and it has a large needle welded onto it or soldered onto it. And you just wear that on your finger and it helps you lay the threads, which I'm going to demonstrate here in a minute. And there's a lot of other things you can buy, you can use. If you don't want to buy a laying tool, just use another needle. Use a large needle. I have, I believe these are 22s, 24, 22s, I think, at least 18s, maybe large, just a large needle. You can also, I've used, this is a plastic needle, a children's plastic needle. These are inexpensive. You can use those. This is actually, I believe it may be a bodkin. It's just a long, smooth, it needs to be smooth. It can't have any catches in it. Smooth. This has got a little ball on the end. So I believe this was a bodkin, which is you would put a ribbon in it and you could run it around a collar or whatever, or a drawstring bag to run your ribbon around. And you would just push this through the through where it's overlapped. So you can use something like that. I also have purchased, these are a couple different beautiful wooden laying tools. I got these on Etsy. That one's got stuff on it there. I got these on Etsy from the same dealer. You can just search for laying tools, or tekobaris is another word. So I got a small handle one and a large handle one. So these are very nice, and they have a lot of different colors and things. Also, if you hit a lot of antique stores or flea markets or other things, they have these. This is like an awl. This is probably bone. It may be ivory, but I doubt it because I bought it really cheap. You can pick these up for very little money. It's smooth, comes to a point. This is another one I thought was really interesting. This one's actually got 2 holes in it. It may have been hooked to something. These probably were not originally used for laying tools. They may have been used as awls. So there's a lot of different things you can use. And if you want to get really fancy, this is my beautiful sterling silver. This is actually an awl, but it is beautiful, smooth. This works really well as a laying tool. It's got a little weight to it too, but it is. And again, I picked this up at an antique store, and it's marked, it is sterling. It's marked sterling. So if you want to feel ritzy, you can get a sterling silver one somewhere. So with that said, I'm going to demonstrate how to do the satin stitch. So now I'm going to demonstrate satin stitch. Again, this is a plastic canvas, and I'm using, this is a cotton, crochet cotton. I have 2 strands in my needle. Again, you can use 2 or 3 strands, depending on the coverage you want. For this demonstration, 2 strands works best. So I will use my silver, my sterling silver laying tool. But again, you can use anything. I was using a plastic needle the other day. So, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to be doing my satin stitches up. I'm starting at the bottom, and you can do this either direction. If you're going to go down, you can do it that way. I'm going to demonstrate the stitches over 4 threads like they are in the Stitch of the Month pattern that you'll get. So what you want to do, you want to take your threads and see how I'm like smoothing this down. That's why you need a really smooth tool. Smoothing them down so they're side by side. Here's both the threads. You want them laying side by side. Then I'm going to count up 4 threads and go down, and you want to hold it down on the piece. See how I'm holding it down? And then as you go, you just move your laying tool up as it the stitch pulls all the way down. So I've laid the threads side by side, up 4 threads, and kind of raise it up. You can move it back and forth to smooth them out. You can see how these threads are lying side by side here. And that's the look you want. You don't want them twisted, because your satin stitch will have this beautiful sheen to it. This won't, because this is a cotton thread, but or a crochet cotton. So it's not a smoother thread like floss or silk. So again, just pull your threads and bring it down. And again, if your thread does get a little twisted, because it does happen, especially when you get to the end, or if you're just working with a really twisty thread, you can go back and kind of straighten the threads out and work them together. I also, let me do one more here. At the end, what I often do, after I have it done, I will go and smooth over top of it. You can do this with your needle, with your thumbnail, just to smooth the threads out. And again, if you're, say you're starting at the top of the satin stitch and working your way down, you just go up with your smoothing. This is why I recommend a stitching frame if you're doing satin stitch, because you need 2 hands to help you smooth the threads out. Now, I took a class, I don't remember who was teaching it, but it was a sampler class. And what she said also you could do is just thread up with 1 strand and then go through the holes, go over the stitch 2 or 3 times until you get the coverage you want. I would rather just do it this way. But again, this is, if you're holding a hoop in your hand, you're not going to be able to, or working in hand, you're not going to be able to lay the threads like this as easily. I know people do. And if that works for you, that's great. You need to stitch however you're more comfortable. That's really sharp. So so you would do all of your satin stitches like that. And I have, these aren't the correct amount apart to match the design, but the center line is a long stitch. Here, I'll do it over here, over 4 threads. So what you want to do, it actually comes up like underneath the other stitches. So your next stitch is going to be over 4 threads horizontally. Now on the diagram, it is in different colors. So you would be doing all of these horizontal stitches and the large cross stitches after all the satin stitches are done. So, and there's your satin stitch. Again, if you have any questions or need help on something, let me know. And let me know in the comments, or comment on the Stitch of the Month Facebook page, and I will answer your questions or offer any help I can. So the next section, actually, the next section of this FlossTube goes with the satin stitch. And that was another reason I did it for this month. I wanted to give an update on Sary Outfil. If you've been following along, you know the story of Sary. This is an antique sampler I'm reproducing. It's dated 1709 by a girl named Sary Outfil. And it's a very big sampler. I'm stitching it on 46 count linen using silk, which is what Sary stitched on. The original sampler was stitched on 46 count linen, or pretty close. So it's pretty much the same size as this. Now this sampler is going to be 36 inches 36.5, 37 inches long when I'm done. So what I've done, I've broken the sampler into sections because, as was common for that day, a lot of this sampler is stitched over 3 threads, but sections of it are also stitched over 4 threads, and bits and pieces are done over 2 threads, just to make it really confusing. So to chart it out was very difficult. So I broke it into sections. Each section is either over 3 threads or 4 threads. So right now I'm working on, this is the next section here. This is the start of it, these satin stitches here, which is why I wanted to talk about satin stitches. And Sary used a lot of satin stitch. She used I'm on section 4. This is section 4. So I've already stitched 1, 2, and 3. And in section 3, there was if you can see, there was an alphabet stitched using satin stitch. And this section, her name, this whole section is satin stitch, including her name and the year she stitched it and other information. And all the patterns are in satin stitch, and it's over 3 threads. But portions of this are, this band are actually stitched over 3 threads, 6 threads, and 9 threads. So I had to diagram this out. This section repeats. There's an X, if you can see that. There's an X, and then this little, it's like an S shape. There we go, a Stuart S, and you can see the sheen from the satin stitch on here. This is stitched with 1 strand of silk though. So there's the silk, 1 strand of silk. So I don't have to lay this, but of course I am very careful to make sure the threads lay side by side. But I had to diagram this little section out, which repeats across the row, because it was kind of confusing. I want to make sure I got the right amount of threads and over the right amount of threads and the correct number of stitches to make this, because if you do them wrong, you won't end up lining up on this edge. So it was very much a challenge, but it's a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying this row because once you get the band down, it's easy to just go across. You don't have to change colors a lot. There's only 2 colors, but it's a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying it. I'm enjoying the whole sampler. It's probably one of the most challenging pieces I've done. I haven't gotten to any of the sections over 4 threads. I think the next section after this is double running over 4. So that's going to be fun and exciting too. So I'm learning a lot, and I'm taking a lot of notes, and I'm making sure I make notes of anything that will help you stitch this. This will be available for sale once I get it done and all the directions written, but I'm taking a lot of notes so that when you work on the sampler, you won't have any problems stitching it. I've had to pull the original sampler back out and look at it really close and go, is this right? How am I doing this? How did she do this? There are some areas like this area here where the letters are stitched. You can see them over 3 threads, but then she put 4 threads in between each letter. So it's a letter stitch over 3 threads, then 4 threads, then an eyelet, then another letter, 4 threads over. So I started stitching it and I was putting them 3 threads apart, and I realized it wasn't lining up. So you have to be really careful. So this will have a lot of notes and information to make sure anybody else will be able to stitch it from the pattern. I try to make sure all my instructions are very thorough, because I don't want you to get to the end and realize you messed up and have to take the whole row out. Luckily, I haven't had to do that, but I definitely have had to take things out and redo them because I messed up, because that's how everybody messes up. And if you don't And if you can leave it in, leave it in. You know, if it's, but for this, I'm trying to make it as close as possible to the original and make sure this matches the chart that you will receive with the kit. And there'll be a lot of pages of charts and instructions with this, but I'm very excited about it. Again, I'm enjoying it thoroughly. So here's section 4, Sary Outfil. I'll provide an update again next time. Hopefully I have a lot more done, and you'll be able to learn more about it. So that's Sary. Next, final thing today we want to talk about is usually I talk about an antique sampler in my collection, but I decided this time I wanted to talk about one of my teaching pieces. Now, this is one of my favorite teaching pieces, and it's been very popular. And I just wanted to share it because it's a very happy piece, and it's a lot of fun to stitch. This is Grandma's button box. This is a fun class that I teach. This is usually taught as a one-day class, has super easy finishing instructions, no sewing, no box making. The box is made. We'll talk about that in a second, what the box is. But it's a fun class. I've actually taught it over Zoom, but I would love to come teach it. If you have a group that wants to have a teacher come in, this is something I teach. It does have pre-work. Now, if you do the pre-work, which is basically these vines, before the class, it's a one-day class. So you can get all the, you won't get it done, but you can get all the buttons, the flowers done on the vine in a one-day class. And if you want to do a two-day class and take more time, we do the vine in class and then work on the buttons after the vine is done, after what would be considered pre-work is done. I will show you close-ups of this in a minute. But again, the kit for this class includes everything but the box. It has the linen for the top. This is banding. This is pre-finished banding. So you don't need to finish the edges. It's already made. This is an 18 count. This is 28 count. Now the 18 count, you would stitch like Ada over just one square. This is stitched over 2. You get all the alphabets. So you get this full alphabet in case you want to put your name or sewing or stitch or something on the top of it. You can also personalize this. This full alphabet is in there, plus this alphabet. You can see I stitched this this was inspired by my grandma Dexter's button box. That was my favorite thing to do when I went and stayed with grandma, played with her buttons. I'm sure a lot of you also got to do that. So I would just sit for hours, and I don't know why, and just play with buttons. They fascinated me. So I was very fortunate that I got my grandmother's button box. My mother had it and she gave it to me. So all of these buttons are out of my grandmother's button box. So in the class, here's the sides with more buttons on it. So the kit for the class, like I said, includes all the finishing materials. There's foam core and batting, 28 count even weave fabric, sulky threads. I don't know if you've used sulky threads, but I love them. They come on a spool. They're a 12 weight, which makes them like a 12 weight pearl cotton, which is about equal to 2 strands of DMC floss. So you only need to use 1 strand. And then they come on these wonderful spools, which I love. So, and the colors are beautiful. And they have what are called blendables, which are like an overdyed. I'll show a close-up of this in a minute, and you can see the beautiful, you can see it on the edge here, see the variegated green. It's beautiful. So it comes with that. I give you all the vintage buttons that you need to complete this. But what's really fun is you can use your own buttons. If you have your mother's or your grandmother's button box, or just buttons you've picked up that you love, it's really fun to sit and watch people pick out the buttons they want to use and put them together. And I try and also give everybody, every class a different special button. Like you may get a China button or some beautiful, I know I've got some on here, some beautiful clear glass buttons. That's a really nice glass button. So I try and make sure every class has at least one special button. And depending on what I have at the time and who's in the class. And what's really fun is if you do it in person, I usually bring a big thing of buttons and people can go through and pick out buttons they want, or other people also bring in buttons and share them. And everybody has a good time digging through all the buttons and picking out buttons they want to use. So, but the best thing, in my opinion, about this, to make this box, you need a box of chocolate. So you have to buy a Whitman's chocolate box. Now, they also have these in sugar-free if you can't have sugar, or dark chocolate or different flavors. And if you want to be really nice, you can bring your box with you and share your chocolate with the teacher. So you do not have to have the box for the class, but a lot of people bring them in during the class, and everybody helps eat up all the chocolates. So again, there's no sewing. The box is pre-made. It fits right on top of this box. This is, and the banding just wraps around. Everything's attached with glue. There's no sewing, just your basic Eileen's tacky glue, nothing, no special glue. I really recommend that over any of the other fancier glues. The Eileen's tacky glue is the best. But there you have it. That's the button box. So now I'm going to show you some close-up of the buttons. So here is a close-up of each of the buttons. What you'll have done first is the vine, and then we'll work our way around doing different stitches and attaching buttons. So you'll learn all these different stitches. This is one of my favorites. This is a detached buttonhole stitch, and you can see the beautiful over-dyed subtle colors of this thread. Here's another one. And it's a lot of fun. It's, let me turn this around. So here's the other side of the box, the bottom row. So there's some black work. This is stacked buttons. You'll learn how to do all that. Here's some other fun stitches. And it's a really, really fun class. And we have a good time sharing stories of Grandma's button box and other people's, how they got their buttons. So again, this is Grandma's button box. I would love to teach it for you. Now, if you have a group, or if you have a group of friends that are maybe all over the country and you want to have someone teach, or you want to have me come teach, I can also teach this over Zoom. That was one good thing about everything that's gone on the last couple of years. We learned how to do a lot of things over Zoom. And I learned how to teach over Zoom, where you can see I can demonstrate the stitches and talk about this. And I've actually taught this class twice over Zoom. And it was a lot of fun, and it worked out really, really well. I also have other classes too that I can teach over Zoom. But if my email is dawn@morninggloryneedleworks.com, it's down in the bottom. But again, this is just, it's just a fun class, and you just learn a lot about the other people you're in the class with, because we spend a lot of time talking and sharing buttons and just having a good time. So there you have it, Grandma's button box. So, and that's it for FlossTube number 7. I want to thank again everybody who has liked, subscribed, commented. Please do all 3. I appreciate it. And if you do subscribe, you'll be notified when the new video posts. And I'd love to see any comments you have about this FlossTube or any other floss tubes, or again, what do you want to learn about? What stitches are you having problems with? What stitches would you like to learn? And I've taken a couple of requests already, and I'll be happy to do more, because I want to do what you want to learn, not just what I can show you, but what do you want to learn more about? So again, thank you. Please, please like and subscribe. And I will see you again on the 15th when the next video comes out. Have a good time. Bye.